The first time Darlene told me to tear down my grandfather's windmill, she said it like she was asking me to drag an old chair to the curb. Casual, smug, and dumb enough to make me laugh if it hadn't made me mad first. She rolled her golf cart into my driveway, jumped out with that laminated HOA badge swinging on her chest, and pointed at the windmill like it had personally offended her. No hello, no warning, just take it down in 30 days or I'll fine you in the ground. I stood there with my coffee still hot in my hand and looked past her at that old steel tower turning slow in the Texas wind. What made it almost funny was that Darlene had lived on Crescent Fork Drive for years and still had no idea that the ugly windmill she wanted gone was the only thing keeping water flowing to every house on that cul-de-sac, including hers. If those blades stopped turning, her faucets would die right along with everybody else's. I asked her, "Do you even know what that thing does?" She curled her lip like facts were annoying. "I don't care what it does. It looks trashy. Covenants say remove it." Then she slapped a certified letter into my hand, spun the cart around, and tore out of my driveway like she'd just won something. My name is Gentry Callahan. I'm 54, and I live on the same 7 acres my grandfather bought outside Kerrville back in 1968. I left once, almost, but the land pulled me back. Out here, the air smells like cedar, dust, diesel, and brush smoke, and if you live with that long enough, city air starts to feel fake. The windmill has been part of this place nearly my whole life. Grandpa rebuilt it from salvaged steel and grit, set over a deep limestone aquifer, and rigged a gravity-fed water system that later served the homes built around my land. And here's the part Darlene never bothered to learn. Before that subdivision was even built, my grandfather made a recorded water easement with the developer, permanent, running with the land. Every deed on Crescent Fork Drive tied back to that water service. The HOA came along years later. The easement came first. That should have ended the whole thing right there. It didn't, because petty people never stop when they're wrong. They usually speed up. Darlene had been president of the HOA for years, and she treated it like a tiny crown. She sent nasty little notices, made everything about standards, and acted like preserving property values was the same thing as being wise. The first complaint about the windmill came in a silly pastel paper notice she slipped under my door. I ignored it. That was my mistake. By August, she'd escalated to formal fines, $150 a day until I removed the structure. So I went to a real estate lawyer named Philippa Broward and spread my grandfather's easement papers across her desk. She read them slow, then looked at me and said, "They can't do this." That sentence felt like cold water on a fever. She explained that the easement had been recorded years before the HOA existed. They had no power to override it, no matter how hard Darlene stomped her foot. If she interfered with the windmill, she wasn't enforcing neighborhood rules. She was interfering with illegal property right tied to water service for 11 homes. Philippa sent a formal letter to the HOA. Darlene answered through her own lawyer, claiming the easement language was ambiguous, which was a pretty brave word to use when the paperwork was crystal clear. I paid the first fine anyway, just to show I was acting in good faith and to keep my paper trail clean. Then I called the HOA treasurer, Otis Williams. Otis was quiet, careful, and the sort of man who noticed everything. Turns out he'd voted against Darlene's enforcement action and had been keeping records on her for 2 years. He told me the board hadn't even followed its own notice rules before voting on the fine. He also told me Darlene had brushed off concerns about where the neighborhood would get water if the windmill was shut down. She'd apparently said, "The city will handle it." There was no city water out there. That alone should tell you what kind of mind I was dealing with. Then she got uglier, after county inspectors came out and confirmed the windmill was permitted and fully legal. Darlene started telling neighbors my water might be unsafe. She spread around at a neighborhood gathering I wasn't invited to, hinting that she was trying to protect people. So I had the water professionally tested by a certified lab. The results came back clean across the board. I made copies and hand-delivered them to every house on Crescent Fork Drive. That was when people started waking up. Some were cautious, some embarrassed, some openly mad at Darlene. One of them, Harlan Cross, a retired civil engineer, told me he'd been documenting her procedural nonsense for months and was ready to help. Another twist came the next week when Otis met me for coffee and slid a folder across the table. Inside were HOA financial records showing Darlene had been quietly paying herself $3,000 a year through an LLC she owned, tucked into the budget under administrative services. For years, $12,000. Now the fight wasn't just about the windmill anymore. It was about a woman who had gotten so comfortable with small power she started treating the HOA like her personal checking account. And then Otis found the real knockout punch. Buried in the HOA's own formation documents was a clause saying the association could not take any action that interfered with the recorded water easement. So Darlene had been trying to use the HOA to attack something the HOA itself was legally required to protect. That's the kind of mistake people make when they think nobody else reads. At that point, Philippa filed a quiet title action in court to permanently confirm the easement. We also built a backup water system on my property, just in case Darlene or one of her hired fools tried something physical. Good thing we did, because not long after that, a man in an unmarked white truck showed up snooping around the windmill supports. Trail cameras caught him. Philippa sent another letter, this one making it very clear that tampering with water infrastructure was not some cute HOA dispute anymore. A few days later, Darlene showed up at my front door holding a $10,000 personal check, smiling tight, saying she wanted to settle this quietly. I looked at her, then at the porch camera above the door, and told her it had been recording since she walked up. You should have seen how fast she put that check away. Her last big swing came at the annual HOA meeting in December. She rented the church hall, brought a projector, made herself a slide deck, and tried to whip the neighborhood into supporting county action against the windmill. She talked about property values, safety, and aesthetics like she was giving a TED Talk for busybodies. What she didn't know was that I'd come prepared. So had Otis, so had Harlan, and so had a local reporter I'd invited. When Darlene finished her presentation, I walked to front and laid out 3 documents in front of everyone. The clean water test, the HOA formation papers protecting the easement, and the court filing confirming we were already taking this to a judge. Then I asked Otis to explain the administrative services payments. Otis stood up with his yellow legal pad and calmly told the room that Darlene had been paying herself through her LLC for years. Darlene snapped that the payments had been disclosed. Otis just asked to whom. That room got real quiet. The court hearing itself was fast and brutal in the cleanest possible way. Judge looked at the easement language, looked at Darlene's lawyer, and made it clear there was nothing ambiguous about it. She granted the quiet title action, confirmed the easement, and ruled that the HOA had no authority to interfere with the windmill or water service. That was the end of the real fight. Outside the courthouse, Darlene tried one last line on me. This isn't over. I showed her the footage of the man in the white truck circling my property. Then I reminded her about the porch video with the check. Then I told her the financial records had already been turned over for review. I kept my voice calm and told her, the windmill stays. The water keeps running. Next time, read Article 7 before you start a war. The local paper ran the story that week. 5 days later, Darlene resigned. She paid the $12,000 back. A new HOA board took over. Otis became president, which was perfect, because he actually respected rules instead of using them like a weapon. Harlan joined the board too. The neighborhood finally started acting like neighbors instead of subjects. The best part came later. The repaid money ended up funding a scholarship in my grandfather's name for a local student going into environmental science or land stewardship. That meant more to me than all the courtroom paperwork put together. Grandpa built that windmill to keep water moving. Now, even the money Darlene tried to hide behind was doing some good. And the windmill? It's still there, still turning. Still feeding clean. Cold water to every house on Crescent Fork Drive, including Darlene's old place. I see her car sometimes. We don't wave. That's fine. Not every ending needs forgiveness. Some endings are better than that. Some endings sound like steel blades turning steady in a hill country wind, while the person who tried to kill the water still has to drink it every day. That's the kind of justice I can live with. So tell me this. When somebody in a low position of power tries to bully people with rules they barely understand, do you think hitting back hard is justice, or does it turn into revenge after a certain point? And have you ever dealt with an HOA or local board that thought nobody would challenge them until somebody finally did?